our project would be more appropriate for a CP than for an ED. They did not give us the impression that it was not likely to go. In fact, they gave us the specific impression that if we could address those items in the letter, which we can, that they would approve the application, that we could get money as soon as late summer or early fall. I think there was some confusion about what was meant in that letter, and I did not bring the clarifying email that I got from Kathy Fagelstaller, who's a staff member out there. But, you know, what we're talking about is a limited blight removal project, which if we go ahead and complete the application and file it and get approved, we can start doing work on the Y and get it done in time for the next funding cycle next year. So the idea that, you know, it's going to lock everything down for the next 2 or 3 years is just crazy. They allot 2 years, and what the letter says and means, and this is what I got a clarification on, if you complete your project, if you're 80% complete within a 2-year period of time, they close it out. They close out that project and open the city back up to apply for whatever it wants. If it goes to 2 years, then you have to be 100% complete. But this is a limited, I mean, just in the scope of what we're asking for the funds for, what we want to ask for the funds for, it's a very limited blight removal project.
Yeah, can I also say, my name is John Gray, and my wife and I own the old Y. What we're talking about is completely different than what they're talking about. What we're talking about doesn't require the city to do anything other than to pass a resolution tonight authorizing the filing of a CP block grant to remove the old Y. It's a blighted structure. There's no money, there's no staff time, there's no nothing. All you have to do tonight is pass a resolution authorizing the filing of a block grant. And what the mayor's talking about in that letter, and we met with the people at the Department for Local Government, we met with them several times, and what they're saying in that letter is, if you do file an application, these are the things that you need to address. And we're fully prepared to address those. It's a $500,000 matching grant that we would have to put money into. The city doesn't have to put any money into it. It's a grant. We've been meeting, we've met with FEMA, we've met with the Corps of Engineers, we've met with an architect, a structural engineer, a boutique management company, and they're all set to go. When people ask us, is the city in support of this? And you know, we don't know, because
Yeah, we don't.
we're not getting any positive feedback from staff. We've met with city manager, the mayor, and you know, we keep.
Well, I guess I would also add, and I actually sent, and I don't know if everybody got a copy of it, I put together sort of a question and answer sheet and sent it to everybody's emails. I don't know if you've seen it or not. We have extra copies if you want it.
Did you see this by any chance?
That's all right. Yeah.
But,
I didn't get to the
you know, I mean, the last time the city of Frankfort, you know, okay, under community projects, there's up to $500,000 available in a grant. And roughly the cycles are about 2 years. Now, what I'm telling you is the truth. I actually ballparked it at 6 months. We talked to a contractor who has experience renovating historic properties into boutique hotels specifically, who says the light removal portion of the project will take anywhere from 2 to 4 months max, and he was given 4 months on the outside. So we're talking about a time-limited project. But that aside, you know, I mean, our experience has been that we come in and ask the city to support this. We start talking about block grants and whether or not other things will be excluded. There's no specific project in the pipeline. There's no specific project really, I mean, a concrete project that anybody's done any work on that's being proposed. And when I talked to the Department of Local Government, which are the state officials, and said, when was the last time that the city even applied for something like this? It was 15 years ago. That means in a 15-year period of time, the city has potentially foregone $7.5 million in grant money that they don't have to pay for, they don't have to contribute to, they don't have to do anything other than authorize the filing of an application. You know, and this is, I mean, for our purposes, you know, this is basically seed money for a bunch of private investment that will come into the city, that will create jobs in the construction phase, that will create jobs as a completed project, that will significantly increase the tax base, that will significantly increase the tourism business in this community, and we are this close to being ready to go. I mean, you know, it is extremely frustrating to have, you know, when we talk about FEMA, it wasn't just the local FEMA office. FEMA came through and toured that building with us, was it last week, a week and a half ago? with national guys who are here because of the flooding and tornado damage. They all went through it. They think it's a feasible project. They're willing to help us. And in fact, they're actively working to try to help us come up with money for the building. I mean, as far, we have somebody who can, well, I guess I was just taking notes, as you were going through your agenda items. And this is a quote that I just jotted down from Mr. Goins. Our budget looks so bad that I cannot recommend that the city pass anything that results in extra cost, especially anything that creates a recurring cost. Then it also said, revenues look to be continued flat. We're asking you to approve the filing of an application. That's all you have to do. If it's approved, we can get grant money that we can use as seed money to attract millions of dollars in private investment, which will create a huge tax base for the city, both in terms of property tax and occupational tax. Occupational tax both during the construction and after the construction into the future. And that's all you have to do. And I'm talking about recycling. I mean, this is the ultimate recycling project. We have a letter of support, which again I did not bring, but if you want to see it, I'll be happy to make copies and hand it out to you, from the Brownsfield coordinator from the state, who's also gone through the building and said, and put in writing for us that he supports rehab of this building because he doesn't want to see all of that material get thrown into a landfill. I mean, it's a sustainable, adaptive reuse project. We've had, in addition to our architect, structural engineer, contractor, boutique hotel management company who's done a whole spreadsheet of detailed projections, which we've also shared with the Department of Local Government after that letter was written. A civil engineer for the outside of the building. We have a guy who's come in to talk about floodproofing the basement in a way that they used for Tulane University in New Orleans through a FEMA grant. I mean, FEMA supported with this method of floodproofing. And another person who sells green roofing material to make it a green building and make it an efficient energy using building. I mean, it's just, I guess it just, well, I've had these sort of, emotional conversations with several members on the commission, but it just boggles the mind that we have a detailed project with a whole team of people all put together, assembled and ready to go. We're talking to the Department of Local Government. They, in fact, have been encouraging, not discouraging. They have encouraged us to proceed under this category in particular because it is a blighted building and because it is a historic structure. And then to have someone say, well, we could advertise and maybe find some people that might want to apply for some money for something sometime. I mean, it's a source of, it's a tremendous opportunity for the city. It's been sitting there a long time. It's deteriorating. Everybody knows it. And in terms of prioritizing projects, I mean, to me, it seems to be a no-brainer to put a specific project ahead of a kind of ambiguous one to begin with, but certainly to put a project, that has some urgency to it because the building is old and falling apart in front of something that can wait a year.
Can I just make a comment, because the city council here is different. I know Mr. Manning was here earlier, but the city actually did put a lot of time and effort to say that this Home Street project is something just out of the blue. If you remember a few years back, the city spent quite a bit of time and effort doing the whole Home Street redevelopment project. There was a lot of community support and involvement in that project. We worked on it for a year. We've already cleared, determining every structure in that. I think I walked every 500 structures and took photos, and we had a historic assessment done of that. And there was discussions at that time of doing CDBG grant applications to redevelop that area. So it's not like this is just something that we just came up with today. That has always been a plan down there, and I've talked to Rebecca several times about CDBG applications. The thing that was the holdup, or the first phase, the first priority was to get the sewers addressed down there. So we had the home fund to do that, but I think the understanding was always after they got the sewers addressed that that we want to do that first, and then the housing would be a lot easier to get into housing. So I don't want to, and I'm not from that neighborhood, but there's people from that could tell you the whole history. I got a whole history lesson in the efforts down there when I started on that project. But my understanding is now that the reason they didn't get the CDBG grant is that they got the other funding, this flood funding for the sewers, and that's why now they could go for the housing that part of it.
But there's still no specific project ready to go.
Mr. Water. Thank you, Mayor. I mean, I think we got a pretty clear contrast between these projects. I agree they're both worthy projects, but under the circumstances, I agree that the Old Wives is a no-brainer right now. I haven't seen any letter, Mayor, from the state or anybody else expressing dubiousness about the project. I haven't seen any letter from the state expressing dubiousness. I mean, I've seen that letter, I just disagree that they express any dubiousness.
Well, the second page is the second page.
No, I read the second.
Yeah,
Those are
second
things that
page
go
of it
into the
says,
application.
if the city wishes to pursue an application, we have the following recommendations to make it more competitive.
Right.
One, a market feasibility study is strongly recommended to demonstrate the need for a boutique hotel. That would include current occupancy rates at other hotels in the city, a comparison of proposed room rates, the expected clientele that would patronize a boutique hotel. A sound cost estimate is needed. Expenditures need to be separated to determine structural and code violation costs, which are directly related to the health and safety issues and could be CDBG eligible under the Slum Blight National Objective, which we talked about. And the interior and cosmetic costs, which are not eligible for the CDBG funding under the Slum Blight National Objective. And then it says the other funding sources need, now that seems like a word, need to be identified.
Well, again, they're
With the
saying,
second reading and 10th reading. And to the extent possible, committed. The estimated project cost for the occupancies for the grades is approximately $5 million. And CDBG's community projects funds, if awarded, would be capped at $500,000. If the other funds are not committed at the time of application, the effectiveness of the project would have to be considered. So, to me, in my thinking, in terms of a window that's open between now and September, and we have had the Home Street project, which was volunteer, and the thing was studied, I guess, on Bell Point, that we would be within an adequate time to do that. That's all I'm saying. If what is said here, the concerns here stated, if we apply for the Y, then it closes the door on this one. Is that right?
Yes, you have to pick one. If I could just make one other comment
Okay.
about.
I want to be.
Again, I'm just speaking from my years of experience with CDBG projects. The statement that all the city would have to do is pass a resolution and that's it. CDBG project is a grant to the city. And you all, if you do this project, you all are responsible for a lot of items. Ramona used to work under the CDBG program. She used to be the enforcer that had all the things the city had to do. So it's, it's not that simple that you pass an ordinance and then you're done. The city would be ultimately responsible for the success of that project.
So that's misleading, that's misleading because what happens is a grant administrator,
Not misleading.
it is misleading.
I'm sorry.
It is.
what happens is you file into the application, if it's approved, a grant administrator gets appointed, and the grant administrator makes sure that everything's,
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. And we have gone over this and over this with
I have to be a
Kathy
grant
Fiddles,
administrator.
Oh, we have.
I'm a grant administrator. They don't appoint you.
No, I know
The
they
city
don't appoint.
procures the grant administrator.
Through the
up
ad,
front.
which we
No.
will do, yes, through the ad, through the ad.
No, you don't
Bluegrass
do it through
ad,
the ad.
yes.
Okay.
The Department of Local Governments even gave us a list of names of people to contact at the ad, They gave us those names.
The ad is one avenue for
Correct,
procuring and administering.
correct.
Right.
Correct.
But you have to go through procurement. That's a federal law.
Well, again, the Department of Local
Okay.
Government, which
I'm
administers
not
this
gonna
federal
argue
law
with
and
you.
this grant money, told us to contact one of these three people.
Okay, Commissioner Watt. Thank you, Mayor. Back to my point. So now that we've read this out loud, and we can all agree that there is no letter from the state expressing dubiousness about the project.
Well, I disagree with that.
Well,
How you
see,
read that? How you read that? I think it's dubious.
in the letter and in the meetings, they have said, and you know, you mayor, the letter that was written to Department of Local Government was just to say what would need to be addressed to make it a good application. That's what they wrote back. We have met with them. The feasibility study is underway. As far as, what was the second thing? A sound cost estimate is, we have that. The other funding sources, you know, we're in discussions with the bank, directly related to health and safety issues. And as far as, you know, parsing out interior and exterior costs, all that is about is they're saying, and we know very well, the purpose of this grant that we want to apply for is to bring it up to code. It's not to do pretty stuff inside. We know that, and all they're saying is that you have to be able to document that these expenses qualify for the grant money, and if there are these other expenses that are something else, we don't pay for that. I mean, that's all that is.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mayor, you're really gonna interrupt me and then not let me continue?
I didn't do that. I don't know that I interrupted you. All right. If you hit a hand or one, and I'll come back to you. And I've been talking.
I said, since there might be,
I don't know. We've been talking.
Confusion as to what the Frankfort local government is going to do and not do. Could we ask our city manager and Ms. Hall to talk with DLG officials to try to clarify in case there is a misunderstanding of what's going on here?
Could I ask if they're going to do that we be present? Because we have had this misrepresented to us several times by staff.
Oh, I think that's.
And then later to find out, and I've gotten a number of clarifications that I have all in email form, that what we were told here is not what they require.
Sure. It seems, because I've worked on this, I've worked on the Home Street thing and some others, and we did get a grant for the grant theater too, CDBG.
That was a home.
The grant theater at home.
That was home funds through Kentucky Housing Corporation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw the grant theater. That's a CDBG too.
Part of the grant,
Just on that, when Illinois was at DLG.
that's probably before my time.
Oh, okay, so you don't know about, okay. That's-
That's payback,
Doesn't
that
pay-
pay, program income.
Okay. And then, can we, anybody that wants to do this, could we do that just to get on the same page, just to clarify, since this is a,
Let me have, if you get back here to Commissioner Wilder, I did interrupt him while ago.
okay.
So we'll be calling.
Thank you, Mayor. Real quick, and it sounds like a lot of this is being repeated, but in terms of the recommendations that the state made to make the application more competitive, the three recommendations, one was market feasibility, so you say
That's
you are
underway.
prepared, that's underway. A sound cost estimate.
Also underway.
Um,
I mean, this team
And
we're
you're
talking
you're saying
about.
that the other funding sources, you're saying the other funding sources have been identified and they're waiting to hear whether or not there's actually interest on the city's part. I mean, I want to do both the project, but I'm seeing, well, I want to do both the project, it's not even a but. I want to do them both, and I'm seeing one project that Commissioner Turner pointed out is relatively underway. I mean, the gun's pretty much loaded, and we've got another one that has yet to even be conceived or developed. I guess I don't really understand why we wouldn't go ahead and do the one that's ready now, and then spend all the time we need to put together an for Beltline and or Home Street, or an area other than Home Street, since Home Street's already gotten some of this attention, in essence. I mean, there are those aren't the only two low-income neighborhoods in town, but you know, Bell Point and or somewhere.
They haven't been.
No, you're right, they've been neglected.
Been very good.
Sure. But I mean, as has one entire corner of South Frankfort, or any, I can think of any number of neighborhoods. But the point is that I'd be in favor of going, I feel like the city, or at least the commission, has been very supportive of the OY project, to the extent that we haven't torn it down. You know, like we tried to give you all time to address the whole thing, and seeing as how we've gone so far down that road already, you know, I'm not ready to pull the, I don't think it would be right for us to pull the rug out from under, from underneath that support. having already gone this far. So I'm in favor of going ahead and moving on the old Y now, and then going ahead and doing our due diligence and putting together a good plan for Bell Point and another neighborhood, and we can have that in place. We're ready to just go next April. That's all I got to say.
I would just like, I mean, you know,
Okay, then Rob will speak after you.
At some point.
okay, well, the questions that I answered in the email that I sent, and I don't know if everybody saw it or not. I did not bother to put my proof for those assertions, but if you want it, I got it. I mean, everything that I said in there is the God's honest truth. So, you know, I can either back it up with the applicable law, I can back it up with publications that are put out by HUD or put out by the Department of Local Government, and I can back it up by emails specifically sent back and forth between me and staff members of the Department of Local Government. So everything in there is true. And, you know, and even what I said in the email itself about how this process works. I mean, we've worked with and talked to George Lehman, who I know that you all know. He is not going to do it because his area of expertise is economic development applications. But he himself named the same 3 people the Department of Local Government did, and the way it works is that grant administrator and grant writer gets paid percentage. Basically, they get paid out of the grant if it's awarded. So there is no cost to the city. There is no cost to the city.
Mr. Mueller pointed out to me that the Grand Theater, and Commissioner May remember this, the Grand Theater applied for, I believe it was some type of CDBG grant, where there had to be a determination made that it was blighted in order for it to be eligible to receive the funds. And as a part of that process, a certain committee needed to be created by the city, which committee was created by the city, and it's still, that committee has never been collapsed, although it certainly has not been active for some time, and that committee tried to help the grant go through the process. There's a very specific process that needs to be complied with in order to determine whether or not a facility is blighted for purposes of these type grants. Now, I'm certainly not an expert in, Martha, if you'll just give me a second. I'm certainly not an expert, but the point I'm getting to is, I know you all will not vote tonight on a resolution just because this is not a voting meeting, but this is an issue that needs to be reviewed, and
It takes about 2 hours to read KRS 91.
Pardon me?
right, but it's an issue that needs to be reviewed, and this will give us,
Regulation.
you know, obviously this, you know, the Grays are very passionate about their project, and I respect that, but we just need to make sure that there are no legal impediments, and I understand Martha's a fine attorney, but we need to go through and see that we haven't done this before, and
This is a typical city ambush. We've been meeting with the mayor, the city manager, Rebecca Hall, for months, and each time we ask, is there another project that needs to be considered? And we've always been told no. As a matter of fact, we were at the last meeting, but we didn't get around to this. We were the only agenda item. So we come to this meeting, and all of a sudden, this lady's here, the mayor's here, Rebecca's here, Gary's here. I mean, what you hear from the city is, you hear reasons why things have to be delayed, why you can't do things. You never hear, that's a good idea, yeah, we'd like to help you. It's frustrating to the nth degree.
Well, I would also like to address Mr. Moore's comment. Okay, a couple of things. I'm a lawyer, John's a lawyer. I've been researching this, he's been researching it. We've been talking to the relevant state authorities for weeks, months. You just looked at that. Now, I know maybe.
oh, I haven't even looked at the statute, I just said, give me a little bit of time to look at the statute.
Okay, on the blight question, we've addressed that already with the Department of Local Government. The Grand Theater was not condemned. You guys, you the city, have already made a determination that this building is blighted because you have a red condemnation sign on the door. That's enough for DLG. We've asked them. That's it. It's done. It's a blighted building, period. You don't have to form a committee to determine it unless you want to take it off and start over.
I've just said, I have not been involved in this project at all. I'm just saying this is an issue that needs to be looked at.
I understand, but can you see from our perspective where every time we come back, we answer a gazillion questions, somebody throws something new at us, we answer that, we come back again, and there's still more. And yet at the same time, you say you support it. I mean, we really want your help. We're begging for your help. If you don't want to give it, then please tell us so we can spend our time and energy and effort and money elsewhere. Because it does cost us something in terms of energy, emotion. We have these people coming down from Lexington repeatedly to go through the building, and they're doing it at this point gratis. So it's costing them time and money. We address these questions, we come back, and somebody, another one crops up. And even coming over here to meet with city staff, I had a staff member tell me that this kind of project that we're talking about is not what these grants are for. Well, they are. That's just wrong. And if there was any question at all, it was already answered in this letter by the Department of Local Government, which said, this is the category you fit in.
Yes, ma'am.
You ready?
Yes.
Yeah. I should, my children are at home, I should probably go home anyway.
I just have a few questions, if you can stay.
Sure.
Cost to the city? You're saying-
Nothing.
Okay. Timeframe, you're saying 4 months this guy can come in and make
He
sure
is
that
telling
you're
me,
building up to code.
okay, talking to local government, if we get the application prepared and filed quickly, we may be able to get approval late summer, early fall. All we need is the approval. We don't have to have a check in hand, we need the approval. If we have the approval, even without an actual check, you can go to the bank and borrow against that money that will come in later and get started on the project. Talking to this contractor who has experience doing this all over central Kentucky, he told me 2 months. And he said, yeah, that's even, and then it was like, okay, well, maybe we'd have, okay, 4. And I thought 6. Our structural engineer was telling us 6. This guy who does this kind of work, has done it for 30 years, is telling us 4 months max to get it out of light. I mean, we are talking about eliminating the code violations. A roof, a floor in the gym, windows, minimal structural work on this building to make it a safe structure to put a boutique hotel in.
Any other obligations that the city's going to have with this building, besides the fact that it comes out, the request comes and says, yes, we support it, go forth with your.
Well,
your
the application gets prepared, and again, we're not asking you to do the application, we're not asking you to prepare the application, we're not, you may have ultimate responsibility because we have to apply through you, but beyond that, beyond saying, okay, we'll sign this, nothing. It has to be administered by a certified grant administrator, I understand that. They get paid out of the grant money if the grant's approved. They oversee the dispersal of the funds and make sure that that money is used for the things that we said we were going to do when we applied for the grant.
And it's 500,000 matching, but you guys are matching another 500,000, is that correct?
No.
No,
You have to establish that you can provide, well, actually, you don't actually have to establish anything, but to give your application the best chance of approval, to put it in the highest priority category, it's a 25% match. Below that, it's a 15% match. The value of the building itself, since we got it cheaply and you guys assess it for a lot more than we got it, goes toward the match. If we get FEMA money, and FEMA, that's another thing that's just so mind-boggling. I've now had several conversations with FEMA. They are bending over backwards to try to help us. Bending over backwards. If we get grant money from FEMA for floodproofing in the basement, and that's a good chance that we will, especially based on the conversations that we had with all the FEMA people a week or so ago, that money also goes toward the match. But the bottom line is in here, we can go and file, but we wouldn't bother to file an application ultimately if we could not say to them, we have all of this money lined up to ultimately complete the project beyond just the blight removal. And if we can show them that, we've got more than the match. We've got 10 times the match. But again, that's not money the city has to come up with, that's money we have to come up with.
And for the grant, when you proposed, you said late summer, early fall, August, September?
Well, if we get moving, I mean, if we have to discuss it for another 7 months, we're not going anywhere.
I understand, but ideally, if it goes, everything goes nicely, like today, go. The grant, let me ask you some questions. Sure. The deadline is September 31st?
No,
You're
it's
saying September 4th?
Right.
And a time frame would be that it would be 6 months for, 5 months, 4 months for the city to put plans together for the grant you're speaking of.
Would they, a lot of the things that you have to go through, which they would have to go through also, just takes time. You have to have a public hearing, you have to have your budget and your commitment letters all together, you have to submit that through the state clearinghouse. That's a minimum of 30-day process. You have to have clearance through Kentucky Heritage Council. I don't know if you all have done a historic assessment and sent that through Heritage Council yet, you have to have that back from them. All those things have to be done before you could ever submit your application.
The Heritage Council is already actively involved in our project, and they also want to see the building.
But you have
I
to
think that's
actually
our
have
meetings
clearance
with them.
letter through the state historic preservation officer. I mean, we still have to talk to them, you actually have to have the clearance letter, as to what their requirements are. And one of the other things is, don't forget, you have to do, if your grant gets funded, you have to do an environmental assessment on your project, including all the floodplain notices. That takes a minimum of 60 to 90 days just to do the environmental assessment on the project.
I mean, again, for purposes of this building, we've had this discussion with DLG as well. They actually brought in their person that deals with the floodplain issues. And because it's an existing structure in the floodplain, yeah, we have to go through that process, but it's basically a rubber stamp, basically cross your eyes and dot your T's kind of process on the environmental end.
If I could just say for the record, we've gotten a letter of support from Senator Julian Carroll, Representative Derek Graham, the Heritage Council, Downtown Frankfort Inc., the Chamber of Commerce, Buffalo Trace, Envision Frankfort, and I'm sure I'm leaving. The only opposition that we're getting is from city staff. They're not only not helpful, but they're actively working against this application. And I take offense at that.
I just wanted to, I know Martha had said that they had talked to George Lehman, and I know George Lehman does economic development, this is not his forte, and that he had said that he would kind of pass this on. So I just called or emailed him today to see if he would be here, because he knows the project so well. And he sent me a letter that he copied David Duttlinger on, who is in charge of CDBG, in charge of Bluegrass Ad. And according to this email, it does not look like that Bluegrass Ad is interested in writing this grant at this moment.
Well, that's fine. I have, well, again, I have a friend whose son is a CDBG grant writer, and he's perfectly interested in doing this project.
And again, why would you do that, Rebecca? Unless you were opposed to this application.
I mean, I guess that's really been our experience, is that, I mean, John's right, our experience has been that people here at the city are coming up with reason after reason after reason not to do this. So again, I say, I mean, if you really don't want to do it, you just don't want to do it, I don't want to come down here and sit here for 4 hours periodically to get all upset over something that that we've worked on in good faith for months. Not only have we worked on it, a lot of other people have worked on it. I am not, if you want names, I'll give you names. We have a credible team of professionals that can carry this off. They can rehab this building, they can turn it into a boutique hotel, and they can run it as a boutique hotel. It's a specific project. I mean, I would ask, if you want money for Home Street or for Bell Point, what house are you talking about? Do you have a specific house in mind? A specific 5
We have
houses?
a waiting list of people who didn't get funded through Home Street, so I don't have that with me. but
And
we
they
do.
can't wait for another year? I mean, is their house gonna fall down in the next year?
So
Because
that's
this
fine.
building,
Why did you come tonight?
I was invited by the city to come and.
who at the city?
The mayor
It's
is,
not, we
I
can't.
was asked, I was invited to come. I didn't come to the city and ask, basically, they're interested in doing a housing project. We had talked about Home Street, so I said I would come and take a look and see what I saw.
Mr. Gordon.
Mayor, may I ask a few questions?
Sure.
Maybe 3 questions. It seems to be a disconnect, because this letter that you keep referring to, and then you keep replying that you've met some of these needs. Would you be willing to share those records that line up with these?
They'll be part of the application.
That's the whole
Uh-huh.
point. We have.
Yeah, I mean, we're not gonna submit it's in our interest to submit the very best application that we can. The city has nothing to lose if the application is approved. We have everything to lose. So the application will include all of that, yeah.
Well, I guess my question is, why hasn't some of that been shared? I've not seen any of this, to be honest with you.
Well, again, like, I didn't say it's completed. We have a hotel, a boutique hotel management team in Upstate, the Grants Park. They want to manage the thing. They are in. They've done detailed projections.
I think, that, if you submitted some of that, that would be very strong, meeting these.
Well, again, we had this conversation a month or so ago. If we complete work on those items that the Department of Local Government needs, we don't necessarily need. There's a cost associated with doing those things. We cannot hire a grant writer, because no grant writer is going to, well, I guess we could if we want to pay them out of pocket, which still adds to the expense. Ordinarily, they get paid out of the grant. So we can't actually get started on the application. Only to then come back in and have this experience again. Oh, now you've not only put time into it, but a whole lot of money that you could have spent on other things, maybe fixing parts of the building, only to then say, well, we think maybe we want to go with the Bell Point thing, or we want to do the home. I mean, it's just, if you want to see the cost projections that we have, or the projections for the hotel itself that the Grass Park Inn people have already put together, I'll be happy to give it or show it to you. I don't know that we want that out in the public record because it's proprietary information for people who run hotels. But if you want to look at it, sure, I'll show it to you. It's extremely detailed. And again, I just put a summary in the information that I sent to the commissioners and the mayor. I mean, based on their projections, the city itself, if this is completed, and again, we have no reason, the city itself is going to make about $50,000 a year just in property tax alone. That's not occupational tax during the construction phase. That's not occupational tax on the 25 to 30 jobs that it will provide to the community. It says nothing about the money that will come in from out of town, because the way these people operate, and they do it in Lexington, they market it not only out of the state, but they market their hotel out of the country. They bring all kinds of people. Well, that's another thing. I mean, even tourism is supportive of us pursuing tax incentives through them. I don't have much more to say.
Let's just talk about it.
Well, honestly, I don't have a lot of time to talk about it because I've left two teenage children at home by themselves. And I guess, I am happy to answer questions, but I really...
But my last question is about the floodplain. Of course, it's in the floodplain, and the Corps of Engineers would be involved, and you say
the Corps doesn't care as long as we
care.
stay within the existing footprint. The Corps does not, they don't have issues with it. FEMA has no issue with it. FEMA and their little minions have all gone through the thing.
Can we get documentation to that?
Emails of it, but again, yeah, you can. But again, it's the truth. And then also, just research I did today, as a matter of fact, even on floodplain insurance, there would be restrictions if it was new construction. There would be restrictions if it falls in, under, it's called significant improvement, except none of the restrictions apply to a historic structure in a historic district, even if it's in the floodplain. So it still qualifies for the National Flood Insurance Program, just, based on what's available on the internet. We have looked at all of these things. And I guess, again, I know I'm emotional and upset about this, but it's because I know what I'm doing. I have researched this to the nth degree. We feel like we've answered every question that's been thrown at us, and still there's more stuff. And even to the point of people making representations that aren't necessarily accurate, that we then go and see clarification about, either from FEMA, or from the Corps, or from the Department of Local Government, or from the national head office, or the regional head office in Louisville. I don't, time is of the essence, and the longer we discuss it, well, I guess honestly, the longer we discuss this, it gets to the point where it's, there's gonna be a point of no return, let's just, never mind. Because you're gonna put us in a position of not being able to get something completed and submitted in this funding cycle. And if we have to wait another year without doing any work on the building, I mean, we can't, for the building's sake, we can't do that.
Okay. I mean, we're under a lot of pressure to tear the building, to tear it down, because it is blighted. And in terms of this question as to whether or not it's blighted, I mean, I can't.
Well, you don't have to have a
I can't
commitment.
imagine any standard for blight that why wouldn't we? I mean, let's just be realistic about that. But I mean, if we're questioning whether or not we want to keep the building standing unaddressed for another year, I know where I stand on that, which is no. No, definitely don't want to keep it just sitting there for another year, regardless of whether or not it'll further deteriorate. That's one thing. So I would prefer that we go ahead and address this sooner. I realize that as of right now, without documentation, that we're being asked to take your word on a few things. I'm comfortable with that because it seems to me that in terms of resolution, the resolution is pretty low cost. And the application itself couldn't get put in until all of this stuff gets addressed very formally on the record as part of the application. And there's no way the application gets put in unless this stuff is addressed, and I think everybody knows that. And I'm happy to go ahead and pass a resolution sooner rather than, I'm happy to go ahead and pass a resolution saying that we're inherently supportive of this project and this concept. And happy to also go ahead and direct staff and anybody else, any other relevant folks, to go ahead and start putting together an actual plan for the other proposal.
Looks ready to be submitted.
And then we just, sure.
Well, and then we couldn't pass a resolution until you go to the meeting, right?
Oh, right, yeah, we can't pass a resolution.
So that gives, that's ample time to provide the commission with any information that they may ask for, or documentation, or whatever.
Well, and I guess that is
Still on
one
the
thing,
agenda.
because, you think not just you all, but we're asked questions, and we think we've answered them. We come to another meeting, we're asked more questions. I guess in fairness to us, if you could give us a list of questions, and, so we don't come and somebody from the peanut gallery says, well, what about a blight commission, or the Grand Theater did it this way, or let's get the streetscape committee back together. Because, we come in here thinking, we've got a proposal and all we get are, well, let's do this, or let's delay, or, it was the same thing with the parking,
It's just, and I'm not, it's just frustrating, and it's also time consuming. And I guess, that aside, I would say, and this is a crass word, we are not going to file a crappy application. We're not, because there's too much writing on it. We're going to do it as great an application as fast as we can do it, so we can get started on that building, because it is a problem, not just for you, but for us. We don't want to see it torn down. I don't think you should want to see it torn down. And if we can all agree that we'd like to see it fixed up, then please give us the best chance to do that. Instead of talking it to death, please.
Commissioner Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. I think, Martha stated that, if we could make sure that we have this list of whatever's needed from our standpoint on the city side. I know that you have to have a development plan.
Well, we're not going to have all that stuff completed in 2 weeks. And again, okay, on the feasibility study, we have a boutique hotel management chain with years of experience running this type of hotel. We do have detailed financial projections for this hotel, again, if you'd like to see that. If we ask them to take time out of running the hotel that they already run, in addition to a lot of other ones, to put together a feasibility study at this point, when we don't even have authorization to file an application. Maybe they'll do it, but I don't think that that's fair to them, because it's really time consuming. And it's something that we don't need to convince them, because they do it. We need it to convince the Department of Local Government. If we're not going forward with the Department of Local Government, I wouldn't ask them to spend a lot of time doing that.
I guess what I was going to say is just make sure that we know because the Grays thought they were coming tonight, that they didn't know they were going to be asked a bunch of questions. So can we just provide from the city standpoint? I guess this is more directed towards the city manager, unless the commission agree. If there's something that they need to do to move forward, can we make sure that they know what that is and everybody's on the same page and that we get copies so everybody's staying in the loop on that? I will say too, as Chris said, years back when we worked on the Home Street redevelopment program, we had to get the sewers taken care of. We had to get the brownfield, the scrapyard was there. That was the biggest impediment. And I think I remember saying at the time, until we get the sewers and the scrapyard taken care of, there's nothing that's going to happen in that area until, and then we were lucky that we got the grant for the scrapyard. The state gave us the money for the sewers, a big chunk of it, thanks to Governor Pat at the time and her staff. I mean, his staff, I was saying Crit Llewellyn was a big help in that. And our state representatives, which you were there, Mayor, and you were there at that time, and Senator Marshall, big helps. But we did have some projects out there, and I hate to see two have to compete, but at the same time, if one is, if it looks like the Y is not going to be feasible, then because they can't do something, we just need to be able to let the Grays know what they're going to be expected to bring back to the city to all the departments. So there's no misunderstanding, because it seemed like there might be.
Well, we don't want any help from the city departments.
Well, in terms of, she was asking for a list of what
Well, I know,
our
I
questions.
one. And I guess actually, I would ask you to just consider this. You have been saying, and we've taken you at your word, that you want to see this building rehabilitated. In terms of feasibility, it is feasible. It is feasible. The only question is are we going to get a community development block grant to help with that? That's the only question. I mean, as far as whether it's doable, it's doable. So I would ask you to ask yourself, in considering whether to allow us to go ahead, is there some compelling reason, some other specific project that's already out there that really should get priority? And I think the answer to that is no. There's nothing certainly that can't wait, and there's nobody in here with specifics in front of you saying we want to do this and we're ready to do it now, other than us. And then secondly, again, we, of everybody in this room, have the interest in making sure that we have an application that they're going to approve, to file. And finally, the absolute worst thing that can happen is that we file the application and they say no. And then you're wide open to do whatever you want, and you'll know that by the end of the year. That's the absolute worst case scenario. Best case scenario is they approve it, we get it done, and you're open up again to do Home Street and Bell Point and all kinds of other things, and we are moving down the path toward rehabbing a building that's valuable to everybody here in this community, not just us. To pay for all of these things, you know, when you talk about cutting spending, which is admirable, but what it seems to me that just in general, aside from the why, that what you really ought to be trying to do, that what we ought to be trying to do as a community is grow the economic pie. And this is something, the why, it grows the economic pie that helps pay for all of these other things that we'd like to have so that we don't have to, you know, cut people's salaries. I just, you know, I don't get it.
I don't see the need for us to determine whether or not you all actually have all your ducks in a row before approving a resolution, because, I mean, I can't imagine a resolution would commit us to anything without caveats pertaining to those ducks, so to speak. So, for example, if we pass a resolution in support of this project, you do your due diligence and find out that feasibility study says it won't work, and find out that it's not blighted under any circumstances.
Well,
I mean, then you all drop the ball, and then the application would just wouldn't happen.
Well, you have to authorize the application to go forward. I mean, meaning for us to start, you know, you basically have to say, you have the authority to go forward and prepare an application, which we will file. But that being said, at the end of the day, when we come back in here with our little application and all of its documents in hand, there's a check the box and a line, and I think it's for the mayor to sign off before that thing is submitted. So if you get it, and you say, hey, you didn't address all of these things.
You know, so.
Right.
But until you say yes, you know, bring, again, and this
Right,
was.
I understand that. Thank you, you answered my question. My other, and so then my question over on the other side is that if this, any work that, I mean, let's say you started working on putting together a plan for Bell Point and or another area, like now, today, and I realize that we already have a backlog in terms of Home Street, so I realize there's already some kind of pool to draw from. But, I mean, is there any work that can be put into that right now that wouldn't, is there a shelf life on the work that would be done?
Yeah, you really need to do your applicants right before you submit your application, because even when you're doing that, typically, you know, if I start working on the application now, it'd be this time next year before, this is just the way things work with CDBG in my experience, you know,
Right.
they don't turn around in 60 days very often. You know, when you're doing your income verifications and your ownership verification, going through all this, it's just really hard to do that now because your applicants will very likely change. If you're not going to submit till this time next year, then you really want to be doing it right before you do it. Property ownership will change, or you just have to redo everything. Income, you know, your incomes will be out of date, your survey forms will be out of date.
So there is a shelf life?
Yeah,
But we don't have-
there's definitely shelf life.
We don't have to do all of that for our project though, because it's a different kind of project.
I mean, I am Aaron. I mean, if we, for me, as far as I'm concerned, the question is do we give this project a chance to succeed? And if not, then we just need to vote to tear it down. I'm not in favor of that. But I mean, just voting to not even give it a chance is the same as condemning it. And this is what's on the line, is what's in front of us. I say we do both, starting with the project that's ready, or closer to ready.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I've got a request. Before moving to the final two items of the agenda, I would like to move those to the next meeting. It being after 10 o'clock. I don't know, Mr. Scout doesn't like to talk sewer after 10 o'clock.
Chris, thanks for coming, so just please.
Now, what was your proposal, I'm sorry?
To move the final two items on the agenda to the 12:30 meeting on Wednesday.
Following our joint meeting with the county, we were having a joint meeting with the
Oh,
county.
yeah, let's do it after the joint meeting, if that's okay.
And they can adjourn in both days, is that what we're saying?
You just go home.
You know what, actually, that's fine, because that context almost requires a special call meeting. And if we're talking about passing any kind of resolution regarding the landlord-tenant pay-pro business, that's gonna require a special meeting just to hold the first reading.
Let's do that.
So we might as well just,
Let's do it as a special meeting.
we're gonna have that special meeting, we're just gonna have any kind of reading on.
You mean following the joint meeting or at a separate time?
No, follow the joint meeting. It's where-
Okay, how about, okay, let's be clear, I'm not hearing anything.
Let the clerk,
My request is to
Move the sewer budget,
move the final two items on this agenda, which is the sewer budget and unimproved property, subject to city limits and tax incentives, to a meeting following the joint meeting
Okay.
next Monday.
now I heard something about action needing to be taken.
Well, if we have to take action on the landlord-tenant deal, then that, or special meeting is an avenue to do that versus a regular.
But I'll need to know
Of course.
by
it's the
Wednesday.
advertised.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously.
Do we want to go put that as a line item on the agenda? Why does everything take so long? So long.
Or is, I think we already, I mean, is there, the landlord-tenant stuff, I mean, there's no reason we can't have that ready for first reading. That's relatively.
I'm following it up until we're having a discussion now about whether to advertise that there will be action taken.
Okay, so the landlord-tenant item is separate from the unimproved property subject to city liens and tax incentives, correct?
Yes.
And for that item, we're to have an ordinance ready?
Ordinance change. And it strike me as such a complicated.
This is on the phone.
Yeah,
We do need an ordinance change.
right. Right.
You'll do this, I take
For the
it.
16th.
Yes.
And that being the action is just the first reading of that.
Right, it'd be the first reading of that and the,
I'm ready.
the approval of the form, which we'll get you all ahead of time so you can look at it. If you're gonna take action on that, do you want to approve the task force resolution at the same time?
What is that?
Yes, as long as we're already gone, so anything can actually do, we just want to go ahead and approve the task force resolution, which,
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Form of task force.
I mean, because they're all
it's just an
issues
extra
are
word update for
related.
an extra 2 minutes, that's
Right,
not.
they're all related issues concerning the application road.
Okay, we all happy?
Isn't every-
I'm happy.
Everybody happy?
Ramona happy?
No,
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I can't
you seconded.
I'm frozen in time.
I mean,
Do you want me to call the roll, or do you want to say aye? Mr. Ryder?
yes.
Mr. Hadden? Mr. Hadden? Turner? May?
We didn't just cover all
It was a.
I've had dinner, but I didn't get dessert.